More than $2.5 billion of Idaho's annual budget goes towards education. And there are many who argue it's still not enough, considering Idaho is still one of the lowest per student spenders in the nation. It is the biggest budget item, though, which is why every year it's one of the biggest debates in the State House. But what if the focus isn't how much the funding is, but instead on how it's formulated? Idaho State Superintendent is proposing a change to Idaho's funding formula, weighted toward those who might need it more. But as Debbie Critchfield told Joe Paris, this wouldn't necessarily translate into a heavier budget.
School's back in session, and yes, that means homework is back on the agenda. But if you want to talk about doing homework, Idaho's top education official has spent years on hers, focused on the state's budget for education.
More than $2.5 billion of taxpayer dollars. I take that very seriously.
Debbie Critchfield is Superintendent of Public Instruction. She spent years preparing for this year's budget proposal.
I started from the perspective of, okay, here's an Excel sheet. Here's where all the money's going in these line items. Here's our bottom right-hand corner. How do we do a better job with the money that we've got? I think that's something that everyone can get behind.
Sound like the dinner table economics your family uses to budget? The idea here is to mirror that concept. Here's the big pitch that Critchfield is set to make to lawmakers.
The public schools budget is $2.65 billion. Of that amount, there's around $380 million of that is called discretionary, that schools get, and they are able to spend however they would like within the arena that they have, of course. We would like that $380-ish million to go out as a reflection of the type of student that is in the classroom for the particular districts.
Critchfield highlights a truth of the matter. Some students cost more to educate than others. The proposal would see tailored allocations out of that discretionary fund.
So everyone would get a base amount of that portion of the budget, and then you would layer on top characteristics. So here's your student, you're going to get X amount, and if that student is special ed, you're going to get a little more on top of that. If the student is also learning English, you're going to get a little more. If that student is an at-risk student, you're going to get a little bit more.
The principal, like with your own budget, looks at a full picture.
We know that some students cost more money, so we've come up with characteristics and factors that are stackable within that portion of the budget.
The goal is to give school districts more flexibility and that local control that's so important in Idaho so they can use funds to meet their specific needs. But the proposal to lawmakers isn't just a yes or no on numbers.
It's one thing to strictly ask for the numbers, but because we're proposing a change in how it goes out, there's got to be some policy bills that go that way. That's going to be our main focus, is going to be the budget. And I think that that's an important role that I have so that our districts can operate and do their business.
The overall budget request is a 2.6% general fund increase, and another big part of that is a $3 million request to create a special needs student fund to help schools with high-cost education plans for special learners. Idaho and Hawaii, by the way, they're the only two states in the union without an official mechanism to offset those costs that are associated with specific types of special needs education. And since we are doing the school theme here, Brian, I wanted to quote one of my teachers. They said, Joe, it doesn't have to be complicated to be good. And that's kind of what we're talking about here with the Superintendent of Public Instruction, where she knows that this is a very complicated formula. Budgets are very complicated, and there are a lot of algorithms inside of those. But Brian, the point that she's saying is we're not asking for millions of dollars just to pay for everything. We have a decent amount of money. We could just be allocating it differently. But it takes two to tango. Again, as I mentioned in the story, it's not just about the proposal on numbers. There need to be policy bills that will be passed by lawmakers in order to move money differently than it is now.
So there would be a slight increase in the budget request, but
yeah, there's inflation and there's stuff.
Okay,
Yeah, there you go.
But algorithms to figure it out. All right, thanks, Joe.